When I first came to Canada 6 years ago, I thought it was going to be for 2, maybe 3 years at most. Now I have a Canadian wife, a Canadian daughter, a soon-to-be another little Canadian coming on the way. And it may all have been a bit of foreshadowing because I actually drove to Canada in my Honda Civic, which I later learned when I was trying to import it, was made here in Ontario. But in those 6 years, I'm still learning more and more about Canada's history. The stories of triumphs and moments of difficulty, moments of failure even. The rich history and the legacy of contributions that the Jewish community has made to Canada. And I'm impressed with how Canadians have grappled with acknowledging a history that's not always been perfect. The truth is, no country has a perfect past. But acknowledging those imperfections, naming them, learning from them, allows us to grow from them. It's a very Jewish thing to do, in fact. We don't skip the bad parts of our story. We don't pretend they never happened or they don't exist. We learn from them. It's in the parsha we read this week. We read about Moses' own failings, one of several moments the Torah tells us about, when in anger he strikes the rock rather than listening to God's command to ask it to bring forth water. As Jews, we don't forget about our moments of failure. We learn from them. We don't pretend like they didn't happen. And it's something that I love about Canada, and I've come to love about Canadians in general. It's a sense of optimism for the future, learning from the past and looking forward to a better and brighter day tomorrow. A recognition that the past doesn't have to define who we are today in the present, and it certainly doesn't define who we are tomorrow. In Canada, I've noticed it's a country dedicated to becoming. Not seeking to return to an empire long lost to history, not imagining that life is perfect when injustice does exist. I found a country that's focused on becoming a nation that truly lives the values that it preaches. A nation that reflects the ideals it claims to hold dear. And no one is always perfect at this, but we're moving forward. The past should not be painted over. But it should not be demonized either. Life is a process of becoming. And those who imagine that our moral values today are perfect, and that those in 10, 20, 50, 100 years won't have anything to criticize about those of us today, they live that long, they're in for a lesson. Life is about becoming, always progressing, becoming a little more sacred, a little more holy, a little closer to the world God imagined for us. Those who see something as complete are missing out. And we see that in our parsha this week. In chapter 22, the king Balak, when he calls on the prophet Balaam to curse the Jewish people, to curse our ancestors, the Israelites, the king says to him, Hinei ha'am yatsa mi Mitzrayim. Here is the nation that came out of Egypt. And Balaam the prophet says, a few verses later, Hinei ha'am hayotze mi Mitzrayim. It's a very slight difference, but the commentators pick up on it. The second is the nation that's coming out of Egypt. The king says, here is the nation that came out of Egypt. He sees things matter-of-factly. He sees things exactly as they are. The nation that left Egypt, that came out. Balaam, the prophet, sees the nation that is coming out. The spiritual essence of it, some of the Hasidic rabbis teach us. The essence of a nation that hasn't yet reached its goal, but is in the process of becoming who they are meant to be. He sees them spiritually. It's an ongoing process, becoming. One that our ancestors never really completed, but they also never gave up on. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Like I said, I get reflective this time of year. July 1st, besides Canada Day, it's when rabbinic contracts start. So 6 years ago I came to Canada, and 1 year ago I had the privilege to begin my role officially as rabbi of this congregation, of this community. And I have to say there are a few things that are different about being the rabbi of a synagogue than there were being the associate or the assistant rabbi of a synagogue. Number one, I don't know if you know this, but there are roughly 52 Shabbatot a year, give or take. About twice as many as it used to feel like there were when I was sharing the pulpit with somebody else. But besides 52 Shabbatot, this past year has been about 200 anniversary phone calls, another 400 or so happy birthday phone calls. I haven't really tried to count the meetings, but I imagine there are several hundred of them, if not more. Thousands of emails. I've celebrated baby namings with some of you. I've stood under the chuppah with some of you. I've celebrated your children's wedding with some of you. Others I've had the privilege of standing with you in moments and times of loss, honoring the life of your spouses or your parents. I've sat with some of you in my office or in your home, some of you in a hospital room. Some of you I've only engaged online, but I hope to see you in person sometime soon. I've lost count of how many cups of coffee I've had with members of this community, or just sitting in my office thinking about what's next for our future. It's been a privilege to be a part of your lives this year, for me and my family to be a part of your stories and your journeys, to listen to your stories and your accomplishments, to learn about who you are, to also listen and learn about your struggles and challenges. I've met incredible people in this community because our community is made up of incredible people. We have leaders in their fields, in law, medicine, education, business, science. We have a head of school and a head of a hospital. We have criminal defenders and prosecutors. We have everything you can imagine as part of this community. And what stood out to me is I've been stunned by the love people have for Beth Torah. The stories people have shared with me of what it means to have grown up here, in the synagogue that their parents helped to build, and they got to see their own kids raised and grown up here, now even sometimes their grandchildren. For others, I've heard stories of how they came to Beth Torah later in their Jewish journey, when other institutions weren't meeting their needs, didn't feel right, didn't feel like home. Here at Beth Torah, in this congregation, in this sanctuary, they found a home. Some of the most incredible people I've met in this community are the dedicated volunteers and lay leaders. Members of the executive, members of the board, members of committees, which we're looking for more if anyone wants to volunteer. There's room for everyone to be a part. And there are so many people who have dedicated themselves to Beth Torah because they recognize that it's a process, continuing to become who we are, what we can be. It's an ongoing process, one that our ancestors never really completed. Here is the nation that is coming out of Egypt. But they never gave up on it. For over 2,000 years, they've continued that journey, that process of becoming. And we owe it to them to continue that process. We owe it to them to ensure that what they fought for, what they sacrificed for, is never lost. We owe it to our parents and grandparents who gave up everything, traveling in many cases across an ocean to start a new life here in Canada. Those who gave up everything so that their children could have a better future, who sought to find a place where they could live the traditions handed down to them by their own parents in safety and security. For many of them, Canada held that promise for your parents and grandparents. We owe it to them to make sure that our traditions are not lost and forgotten. We owe it to our own children, to our grandchildren, to ensure that even though they have the benefit of living in a free and democratic society, they also have the blessings of prosperity. They also have the blessings of prosperity of what it means to be Jewish, along with the blessings of what it means to be Canadian. We owe it to them that they know the blessing of living a life in community, a life in connection with others, that they have the same opportunity to take the traditions handed down to us, to find their own path as they incorporate them in their lives and families. We owe it to them to ensure that Beth Torah exists not just for the past, as a remnant and a monument to a great history, but also for a rich future. That we celebrate the accomplishments and achievements of our rich history, of which there are many, but continue that legacy to fulfill the potential what Beth Torah can become for tomorrow. Before I took my role as your rabbi, I was asked to write a piece for the Passover magazine a little over a year ago. In it, I wrote the following: together, we will create a community that will inspire others, defining what Jewish life can be in the modern world. It will not happen overnight. It will not be a single event or a moment, but like the Exodus, it will be a journey. I've been honored this year to have the privilege of walking that journey with each and every one of you. And I look forward to all that we're going to accomplish in the year to come. Shabbat Shalom.